welcome to another episode of UMO.Design's A Design Dialogue series. I am Shyamasundar Duriseti, co-founder UMO.Design and co-chair Content UXIndia conference. For this episode, it's my pleasure to introduce Thomas Girard, our keynote speaker at the upcoming International Conference on Design, UXIndia 2021. Hey Thomas, it's great to have you on UMO.Design's A Design Dialogue series. UMO.Design community will be delighted to learn more from you in the lead up to UXIndia Conference 2021. So let's start with the big shift. In the last 18 months, the world has seen accelerated transformation in all aspects of our lives. So can you share your thoughts on the big shift and the role of design to start with?
Yeah, my idea is always that there's quite often a big technological shift and we focus on these technologies. Maybe some examples would be mobile first, switching from designing from the big screens to the small screens, and then small screens up from there. Then emerging technologies like smart home, AR, VR, connected objects, wearables came into play. And those were seen as future technologies, but actually they became everyday technologies. And then, with things like the metaverse and Mark Zuckerberg kind of presenting that as something future focused. I think, yes, there are these technological shifts, and I think there's a assumption that we need to reinvent the methods and the processes in order to create these new technologies and to work with these new environments. But I think that's actually a mistake. I think a lot of our ability to go through the creative and design processes is already there, and it can be applied to these new technologies. And I think we need to draw from the past in that way. I think that would be kind of, I think, yeah, to kind of sum it up is that the technologies are changing, but the ways that we approach them shouldn't.
Great. So just to build on top of that, are you seeing any changes in practicing design? As we know, I know that you mentioned that if we think that we need to make changes to it will be a mistake. But then, is there anything that you're observing in terms of either correcting it? Are people thinking that we need to bring in new processes and stuff like that? So anything that you're observing?
Well, I always talk about design thinking and the kind of mistake of design thinking, but I like it actually because it was a process that separated itself from that craft and those technologies in a way. Things like agile and lean, design thinking, low fidelity prototyping, these kinds of ideas coming into the forefront, I think has been really important. And I think to continue to emphasize those is how we get through these new different times.
Okay. Now let's shift gears, right? So especially with pandemic coming in, so there have been some sectors which have drawn a lot of attention. So be it the way we work and also obviously healthcare sector and bunch of other things that are related to it, including well-being of employees and all those things, right? So do you think designers have any specific unique opportunities to go after with these things? Anything that you have been observing in that regard?
Yeah, I've been primarily a design educator for like the last 15 years. I did have a solid career as a practicing designer. The height of that would have been being a staff UX designer at the computer maker Lenovo in Beijing, where I worked at their Innovation Design Center, and we worked on early mobile and tablet products. And we were thinking very future focused, 3 to 5 years into the future. And after that, I kind of committed to the academic side and wanted to see that through. I attended a conference in Barcelona at one point called the Design Principles and Practices Conference, where there must have been about 200 design academics talking about pretty complicated ideas around design And that was really exciting for me, and my mind kind of exploded, and I was like, this is what we need. I think there's always been a tendency for design to be focused on the vocational side of design, and for people to say that yes, design is a practicing thing, and let's not overemphasize the academic. But I think that's a mistake. And I think part of the strength of the academic is that the historical aspect of design gets emphasized, and as time goes on and design gets more mature, that historical lens grows, and we have more to pull from with it. With my students, I always say that like all of the stuff that they're designing, it was probably designed already in a lab somewhere, and they could easily probably open a big book from of logo types or shapes or forms or whatever, and those things would exist if they relied on the mathematical proportions from nature and things like that. A lot of that stuff has already been made, and we see it over and over again with the tech companies reinventing their logos and borrowing from history. I think we need to continue to do that. And I think we need to be open about it as well. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it kind of brings me to the next question as well, because I think you yourself have been spending a lot of time in design education, and then have been a recipient of numerous emerging scholar awards, right? So in design in general. So again, kind of tying it back to this big shift. So there's always been this perceived gap between industry and academia. So now with this big shift, do you think it's going to add to the problem, or any thoughts around that?
I guess I would use the big shift idea to bring it back to some of the ideas that people are talking about these days. John Maeda recently came out with a book called How to Speak Machine. And in that book and in some of his other talks, he talks about the historical way of design, starting with a text-based environment, moving into photos, and then moving into video. And then some new technology comes in, and then it brings us back to the text, and then back to the photos, and back to the video. New technology, back to the text, back to the photos, back to the video. When Mark Zuckerberg first kind of amplified his message around the metaverse, he said, okay, text, photos, video, and now a fourth piece, metaverse. But I think that's a farce. I think it's text, photos, video, and then that's the end, and then we cycle back again. So I think, kind of returning to the ideas of processes and methods, but I do think history kind of in that way works that way with design.
Interesting. So in saying so, are you giving any hints about what you're going to talk at the conference? So can you give us some sneak peek into what you're going to speak at the conference as part of your topic?
Yeah, my talk is called Unique Ways of Prototyping. It's an evolving talk around basically a very low fidelity way of prototyping or making that I've been doing at conferences and universities and meetups for the last few years. And it's very much about not needing any knowledge or expertise in order to be able to create these days. I think design these days is very much a dinner table conversation, and I think that's a new thing. And I think everybody has an opinion now about design, and they think they know things. And that, in a way, is a great way to be able to have these conversations and to learn more for all of us.
Yeah, we can't wait to listen to your talk at the conference. So any final thoughts on UX India and then how things are shaping up on that front in general? What interests you, and then what do you think we can do going forward in the future as a platform?
Yeah, as we were chatting about earlier, my first introduction to UXIndia was at the conference in Bangalore, in person before pandemic, and I had a fantastic time there, and I couldn't believe there were so many UX people in India willing to gather and chat about these ideas in that way and grow and promote UX, and that was a super special time for me, and I really saw a lot of potential. I think that pandemic and this particular conference is a real exciting time to scale, maybe in a way that you can reach different communities and different audiences. And I think that's going to be really good for UX India. I would love to see that piece of it kind of continue and move forward.
Awesome. So with that, thank you so much, Thomas, for sparing your time and sharing your thoughts with our community. We look forward to your talk at UX India 2021. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.